on the road to reform. Myanmar has seen great changes in recent years, changes that have been welcomed by the West. Now, for the first time in 47 years, Myanmar's leader was welcomed to Washington.
We are trying our best with our efforts to have political and economic reforms in our country. But we will also need the assistance and understanding from the international community, including the United States.
U.S. President Barack Obama encouraged Myanmar to preserve its moves toward correct political reform.
We very much appreciate your efforts and leadership in leading Myanmar in a new direction, and we want you to know that the United States will make every effort to assist you on what I know is a long and sometimes difficult, but ultimately correct path to follow.
It's a huge change from just a few years ago, when Myanmar was treated as a pariah by the Western world. Myanmar's current leadership has been in power since 1962, the board, with Aung San Suu Kyi winning a seat in parliament. With general elections set for 2015, Suu Kyi is widely expected to win. However, the 68-year-old woman believes Myanmar's reform still has a long way to go.
There is no transparency in Myanmar's justice system, and the administrative branch has too much influence. The judicial system has to be independent to be credible.
If she does come to power, she'll also have other problems to contend with. Sectarian violence is on the rise, casting a dark cloud over the reform process. Much of the conflict is centered in the western state of Rakhine, where nearly 200 people have died in conflicts between Rakhine Buddhists and the Rohingya Muslim minority. In 2012 alone, 140,000 people were made homeless by the ongoing violence. And this is a big challenge during a difficult transition. But Saint's U.S. visit is a symbol of international acceptance after years of isolation. American and European sanctions are being lifted, which is good news for a struggling economy. With its market opening up to the world, the country is enjoying more foreign investment than ever before as reforms continue.
Very interesting story about Myanmar. To talk more about Myanmar opening up, with us from Washington, D.C. is Ambassador Priscilla Clapp, former Chief of Mission of the U.S. Embassy in Myanmar and presently with the Asia Society. From Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, we have visiting fellow at the London School of Economics and someone who formerly worked with the Myanmar military, Dr. Zani. And here in Beijing, we have fellow at the China Institute of International Studies, Mr. Jia Xiudong. Welcome to the three of you to our program. From longtime foe to now newfound friend. Ambassador Clapp, I understand you've been working for the U.S. Embassy in Myanmar more than 11 years ago. What do you think about the nature of relations between the two countries, Myanmar and the U.S.? What do you think the two countries are looking for in this bilateral relations?
Well, first of all, I think they're looking to normalize a relationship that has been very frosty for more than 20 years. Secondly, from the U.S. perspective, we would like to see the democratization of Myanmar continue. We are very encouraged by the moves that have been taken over the last 2 years by President Thein Sein. I think on the part of the Myanmar government, they're looking for essentially the same thing, and that is support from the United States in moving forward with the democratization. And not just political support, but economic support.
Given the geopolitical importance of Myanmar in South Asia and one linking East Asia and South Asia, Dr. Zarini, what do you think the two countries are looking for in these relations?
Did you say geopolitical?
Well, I think...
Yes, I would like to go to Dr. Zarini for this.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Dr. Zarini.
Is that Zani?
Yes, Dr. Zani, go ahead.
Yes. Well, in one word, China. You know, like what defines the new U.S. policy towards Burma is neither democracy, democratization, nor human rights. It's all about China. You know, I lived in Burma from 1963 to 1988, and the United States pursued a policy of containing communist China. Now, since 2008, since the United States shifted its policy, it's called Asian pivoting back to Asia or rebalancing. It's all about containing capitalist and increasingly confident China, and that's what is happening. And the rest is just rhetoric. Human rights, democratization, reforms. It's all rhetoric.
All right, Ambassador Clapp, you want to react to that?
I disagree completely with that. Our policy towards Myanmar doesn't have much to do with China. We recognize that China is a very large neighbor and always will be a dominant force in Myanmar. The United States is half a world away. We are interested in democracy. If we had been concerned about geopolitical issues, we never would have had all those sanctions on the country. We never would have cut off the relationship totally for 20 years. It just doesn't make sense.
Mr. Jia from Beijing, you want to react to that?
Yeah, of course. Actually, the United States keeps China in our mind when engaged with Myanmar. However, it's not the U.S. re-engagement with Myanmar is more than about China. And actually, China urged both sides, both countries, to engage with each other. And China played a constructive role in opening up and reform of Myanmar. So it's more than about China.
Interesting. We can debate about that for an hour or two. But let's go to some of the details about the latest development in Myanmar. We understand political and economic reform have been transforming that country. But Dr. Zani, as a Myanmarese yourself, you must have also be aware of the difficulties the country is facing. For example, the growing disparity. For example, reform hardly done outside major cities. For example, ethnic conflicts and sectarian conflicts, as well as the role of the military. Do you think the pace of reform in your country is satisfying at this moment?
No, actually, it's not the pace
Dr. Zani?
I think yes, the pace of reform isn't really the problem. The problem is that the reforms, the manner in which reforms are pursued, and the question about in whose interest or towards what goal reforms are pursued. I think difficulties is an understatement. If you look at the so-called sectarian violence between Rakhine Buddhists and Rohingya Muslims in Western Burma last year, even the more conservative but very credible international human rights organizations such as Human Rights Watch, based in New York, calls what has been happening in Western Burma, crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing, backed by the security forces that only take order from the highest level of government in Naypyidaw. And so I think the issues here are, not just simply that, the pace of the reform, but the reforms are pursued almost entirely, towards the goal of strengthening the military and its economic interests. And that is what is most worrying.
I see your point. Ambassador Clapp, given your knowledge about Myanmar and the current situation, what do you think about Mr. Zani's argument? Is it fair?
I tend not to agree with the arguments that he's making. I think there are different actors in Myanmar. There are the reformers and there are those that feel threatened by the reforms. I do agree that there are enormous economic disparities in the country that have to be addressed. I think that President Thein Sein is trying to address that, but there are others who have a lot of control over the economy who are resisting.
Well, talking about those who are for and against the reforms inside Myanmar, we do want to mention a very important figure, which is Ms. Aung San Suu Kyi, of course, she has been the spiritual leader of that country for quite a long time, but now she's playing a totally different role as a political leader and as a possible candidate for the future election. Ambassador Clapp, what do you think about her role now? And do you think she will be working with the government? Or what is likely to be the chemistry between her and the current administration?
Well, you could say that she's already working with the government, because when she was elected to the parliament, she actually became part of the government. And in that capacity, she works very closely with